basically talking about how we think the Right ATS can help you grow your business. And we're going to cover a handful of topics. My intent is to have this not be salesy at all. This is just, our understanding of a ATS landscape and what we, consult our potential customers into doing when they want to evaluate different ATS vendors. We're honestly, winning your business when we're not the right fit isn't going to do anybody any favors. And so we want you to be able to make informed decisions regardless of what tools you end up using. Today we're looking at covering the overall ATS landscape, just to talk briefly about that. And then we'll talk about strategies for assessing your own needs and vendors. And I'm hoping to build on some of my experience doing this. I've prior to Correlate, a little history about me. Correlate is actually my fourth product. They've all been successful. But my entire career has been either building products or building talent businesses, consulting businesses. The last one was ultimately sold to Accenture back in 2011. And I've hired hundreds and hundreds of developers, and program managers and testers, et cetera, many times without the benefit of a good recruiter. And during this time, I've also implemented tons of CRM systems. And so I feel like I can bring a lot of thoughts on both the software implementation side, the consultative business side, and on the hiring side. So when assessing your needs for a vendor, we're going to talk about that. We're then going to talk about data migrations and implementations. There's lots of tips and tricks as to what makes an implementation of any system successful, and what are common causes of failures. And then lastly, we'll talk about the cost and ROI, things to consider when picking a new solution. When this is all over, we hope that you're able to, answer these questions. So we'll cover some strategies for picking the best ATS for your business. We'll talk about this concept, this sort of buzzword that's floating around recently, recruiting CRM, recruiting marketing. Talk about my take on that. And talk about ways to reduce risk for implementing a new ATS, as well as some common pitfalls to look out for. So first off, a little bit about us. Where did our name come from? Well, it's actually the mixture of two words, which is create and relationships, which we think is at the heart of any talent-based business. And so when we started the company in 2012, we've since added about 500 customers, mostly focused on agency, recruiters. The remaining 25% is made up of the departmental recruiting teams within large organizations. So you can think executive recruiting teams, et cetera. And we really started the product with the vision that we needed to be flexible and easy to use. That ultimately allows recruiters to be, good recruiters to be great recruiters and focus on building relationships, which is the backbone of this business. And we believe that, recruiters are more important than ever right now. Throughout the years, there's always been, some new technology or some new thing that has, claimed to, you don't need recruiters anymore. But I don't think it's ever going to go away. You're never going to remove the face-to-face. Today's latest thing is machine learning, right? The machine might say the candidate's the perfect fit. Doesn't mean they're going to take the job. Doesn't mean they're going to trust you, right? Just because Alexa says, hey, go take this job, doesn't mean you're going to say yes, right? It needs that face-to-face connection. And so we built our software, with that in mind. And I believe, that talent's hot. This is a hot space and opportunities knocking. Some stats that you may or may not have heard, right? The U.S. unemployment rate is down to 4.3%, and globally this is lower in some countries. Especially in the hot spaces, we're at full employment. You're trying to find a remote healthcare professional. That's not easy, right? You're trying to find a developer in a hot market. That's not easy. You're trying to find laborers in certain markets. That's not easy, right? There's plenty of opportunity out there to help align the right candidates with the right opportunities. Next stat is, good old millennials. I think in 2015, millennials now make up for the majority of the labor market. And you've also seen this stat, I'm sure, but, Gen Xers were like 1.5 times more frequently changing jobs, and Gen X, millennials do it 2 times. This is a rising trend that's been around for 30 years, right? As people are switching jobs more often than ever. And when that happens, you have more employment transactions. When you have more employment transactions, you need more recruiters and people to make it all happen. And so thankfully, we've come a long way. The tools have definitely gotten better. So there's the old DOS screens and Windows screens and Access databases. It's interesting though. We migrate customers from systems that are surprisingly legacy. So far away from mobile experiences. Like they have to remote desktop into an old Windows server, which I'm sure is running underneath some guy's desk to access their app. This is real. I mean, we've done these migrations. It's pretty crazy, some of the systems that are out there. But fortunately, that's all behind us. But one thing that's never going to go away is the phone. All right, and so this goes back to to the relationships. So how can the software help keep you making those relationships? So what are recruiting solutions doing today, and how they sort of evolved? On this chart, I believe essentially, if you think of recruiting tools like this, you can see on the left, you have sort of the lowest value, and on the right, you have the highest value. So we start off by, being a place to track stuff, right? Great, I need a database. Everything's going to get in there. Next, people start saying, well, we can use this database to enforce things and make sure we're complying with rules and regulations. And then as volume comes into play, well, let's just start measuring stuff. Let's make sure we're getting those calls done and those send-outs done. Finally, we start talking, maybe these tools can help us start sourcing stuff, getting out to the job boards, integrating with other tools like LinkedIn. And then we start talking about recruiting marketing. Well, now how can I broadcast and then start to engage and keep those people engaged, both my customers, right, people who have recs and jobs to fill, and my candidates. And I think when all this is happening, what effectively you're trying to do is you're trying to empower the recruiter. You're trying to empower the recruiter to do what they know how to do, right? Make those connections, get that right candidate and that right opportunity. And of course, tools can automate some or all of these things, but I think, like with all things, you don't want to believe that things are too good to be true, right? So it's the right amount of automation in the right spot that actually makes sense. And I think people shouldn't lose sight of what they're actually doing and the value they're actually bringing to the equation. So first, little poll to see who's engaged, et cetera, is I wanted to know, if you really think about it, how many different systems and tools do you currently use to recruit? This could be, email tools, websites, Chrome plugins, job boards, social networks, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll talk about this in a second. So with that, I want to try to open up this poll and see if you guys can vote. And I think everyone should see the answers as they come in, which might be interesting. Is it popping up? Okay, cool. So if you want to go ahead and answer, and think about everything. How many different tools do you use total? Maybe look around your desk, see what you got going there. We'll give it a minute. Is that showing up in real time? No. Okay, cool. So how do I share the poll? That's the question. I think when I hit close, so I'm gonna give it another minute. Okay, I think we've got a clear winner. And share. Does that work? Yeah, there you go. Nice. Most of you use 5 to 10 tools, which is fun. And that's actually that's pretty good. I think anecdotally I've seen a lot of people who use a lot more tools, but I think it's good to hear that people are able to narrow it down. Clearly, what you want is, as I switch back over to the presentation, clearly with all these tools, what I've found in my experience recruiting, that there is no easy button. There's no shortage of tools that have come and gone. The resume's dead, the resume's alive again. Now all the job boards have easy apply. To me, it almost feels like there's sort of a arms race between how fast candidates can apply and how fast your ATS can weed out garbage. In fact, sort of anecdotally, we hear that the number one complaint from applicants is that they feel ignored, right? Well, and the number one complaint that employers think is that they get too much crap. And so clearly software necessarily isn't helping here. And it's funny too, when I've seen sort of anecdotally, I mean, I've seen recruiters when we're doing support, and their Chrome browsers look something like this. And what strikes me is that I don't know how, I don't know how you can be effective when you're constantly chasing, you're doing sort of a swivel chair integration between all these different systems. I once saw a funny video where someone was using like 4 different tools in order to get around the need to pay for a resume on Indeed. It was like, I'd find them on Indeed, and then I copy the name into this tool, and then that finds them on LinkedIn, and I go to LinkedIn and I copy that into this tool, and then from that tool I then pop them into my ATS. And I'm thinking like, wow, like that's a whole lot of work just to get that done. And so, speaking of the ATS landscape, there's no shortages of ATSs out there, right? If you go to Capterra and do a quick search, there's over 300 tools on the market, which is a lot. There has been some consolidation, but there's new entrants all the freaking time, and there's hundreds and hundreds of other little tools and widgets that you can throw at it. And why I find that the poll that you guys entered encouraging is that I think what we all realize we need is the right size tools and the right set of tools to create the right combination that works for you. And I think you need to be careful because I think some ATSs try to be the sort of the all-in-one. And when you get to sort of the all-in-one, generally speaking, dev teams only have so many resources. If you spread yourselves too thin, you end up having the tool not really being good at anything, right? On the flip side, if you go with a one-on-one and one-on-one where you have hundreds of little point tools, you're stuck in the middle having to integrate all this stuff, and that's not very efficient either. So how do we decide, right? Well, I think this is pretty straightforward and pretty simple, but of course the hard part is the practice. You need to develop a plan, you need to work a plan, and you need to take your time. And so to me, there's 2 sides of the equation. One is figuring out the right vendor that is a good fit for you. And then second, we'll talk about product. But first, it's important to find a vendor that is aligned with your needs. And I'll talk about this in a second as to why this is really important. You want to find a vendor that's going to be responsive and receptive to your feedback. Are they able to change the product or listen to feedback in a way that is beneficial to you and people like you? You want products, obviously, that are continuing to grow and be invested in, right? If the recruiting, things are always changing. Mobile's hot, new job boards popped up, Chrome parsers are in. If your tool isn't keeping up with the industry, then that forces you to make moves, right? So you want to find a vendor who's constantly investing. And finally, you want to make sure you have a vendor that's going to train and offer support in a way that you need. So on that, let me talk about, I'll put on my software developer hat for a second here and talk about how vendors focus on a market. And there's sort of 3 ways that I've seen this done. And this is important because when the vendor focuses on a market in a certain way, that will tell you whether or not you're a fit. And my goal here isn't to say that one is right or wrong. It's just that you need to know what you need and then find a vendor that fits what you need because there's so many choices out there for you. So the first is sort of the self-focused. This is, built for recruiters by recruiters, and that's awesome. Or the other one I've seen is, some developer hired some guy one time, and he or she thinks that they have cracked the code on how best to do hiring, and so they went off and built a tool that does it the way they do it. In my experience, these tools tend to be less flexible. They're designed to work the way that person who built it works, and that's great because if you work the way they work, that tool's going to be highly specialized and work perfectly for you. The next are vendors who are probably a little more mature than that, and they sort of focus on markets, right? We're going to build tools that are for, so Google Hire just got launched, right? And they're very clear. You have 1,000 or fewer employees and I think their sweet spot is 250 and fewer employees. You use G Suite, you're at this price point, and you have this need. It's a very targeted market focus. Other products, Taleo, we're going to focus on Fortune 500 that have these needs. So that's awesome as long as you know what market you fall in and where you fit. And finally, I think there's the more persona focused, right? We want to build software for these individuals and their needs. And in my experience, the flexibility of the software tends to go up as you move to the right? Because the designers of the software have a wider range of experiences they're trying to enable. And so the question really becomes what works for you if you can identify where you fit in this equation. And so here are some things to think about when you're thinking about yourself. And I think it's important to be honest about this because it'll help you find the right vendor that fits you. And these are just some criteria. There are others, but when I look at the competitive landscape, these are things I consider. So there are tools that are clearly targeting smaller businesses, and there are tools that are clearly targeting enterprise, right? If you're a small shop and you buy a tool that is maybe bigger than you need, right? You can expect it to come along with all the pricing and complexity and setups that the larger customers are always used to paying, right? You might also have functionality that is bigger than you need. So where do you fall on that scale? Next, tools can be focused more on agency or corporate. There are tools that focus on both, but you need to be mindful about how they focus on both because the needs, while very similar between the two, there are some specific differences. Some tools emphasize end user productivity, and others emphasize more measurement and compliance, right? I think the same is true when it comes to quality versus volume. I think you'll find tools that focus on executive search, for example, highly focus on quality, and tools that are really about churning and burning, and making sure you hit your numbers are all about the volume. And finally, I think there's tools that are focused primarily on professional recruiters, and there are others that are focused more on the casual recruiter. And what do I mean by this? This is ATSs that are built for full-time recruiters who are sitting down all day long and working a pipeline, sourcing candidates, getting through the process, versus I need a tool to help me hire, but it's not my day job, right? And so where you fit on that spectrum might help you decide which vendor or product is right for you. So I think these are things that are important to consider. So next, let's talk about product. So once you have figured out what vendor is going to be a good fit for you, now we can talk about what product's going to fit for you. And it's all about obviously features that you need, but I think it's also about the right size features and features that focus on your market's needs. I think the product should be intuitive to you and flexible enough to fit your process. And then finally, obviously be a product that you can afford and fit your pricing model. But all of this is subjective. And so I think you need to demo and try out different products to really decide where you fit on these things. So in that vein, I have our next poll question, and it is, what do you wish you had more time to do when it comes to recruiting? So like if a tool is to help you, what would a tool do to like help you? What do you wish you had more time to do? And I've opened up the poll. Great. See if people are still awake during their lunches. And I think the answers here probably depend largely on what kind of recruiter you are, right? And where you sit in the organization. We're about 70% voted. Give it another 10 seconds or so. See if we can get up to 80. 5 more seconds. There we go, 80%. Cool. So the answer is awesome. Clearly, the problem out there is sourcing and engaging clients and candidates. And I think this is 100% in line with what we see, right? It's hard sourcing good candidates and filling the top of the funnel. But likewise, I find that people spend an incredible amount of time engaging with candidates and clients, especially when it comes to like generating reports for their clients, et cetera. So cool. Thank you for that. So I think what's important here is to understand, knowing that, finding tools that are going to help you solve the problems that you're looking to solve is the real question, right? So if sourcing is your primary thing, then you're going to want to find tools that are that are really effective at that. If engagement with clients and candidates is number one, you want to find tools that effectively do that. And so I think what's important is that when we go back to our sort of value plan here, is you need to be honest about your organization and your company's needs, and decide which of these things is important to you. And I think this is different for every organization. And it's also honestly different depending on where you sit in the organization, but that's another conversation. But figure out what's important to you. And then decide which of those things that you actually want to spend time and energy trying to automate, right? Just because a system is good at it and can automate it doesn't necessarily mean that's where you need to spend your time and money automating, right? And so, and what I mean by this, right? If having an amazing website experience is number one, well, you might spend a lot of resources building a highly automated, deeply integrated experience between your website and your ATS, right? If that's not important and instead measurement is number one, you might spend a lot of time building custom reports and building those reports up to dashboards and et cetera. My point is that you need to not only prioritize which capabilities are important, but where you want to invest in time and resources to automate and fully implement is another important question. And so on this, we've responded to plenty of RFPs, and I've done that, myself in my past life. I've also helped many customers evaluate systems, and I mean, here's some strategies for doing that. I think it's important to come up with a list of the features that you have identified that you need. I would group them into must-haves and nice-to-haves. Back at Microsoft, we call them prize zeros, prize ones, and prize twos, right? Prize zeros, like you can't ship without. Prize ones are nice-to-haves, and prize twos are always getting cut. And I think it's important to have that prize two, that don't care bucket, because then you can when you're evaluating or your team's evaluating, you can save yourself a lot of time and heartache re-arguing the same questions, right? If you pre-put things in a don't care bucket, right, that can save you out. And I think as you do this, you should also consider about, well, what's important now versus what's important later. And that's important, right? So as long as a tool is going to be able to get there later when you need it, I think it allows you to make better decisions in the short term by not focusing too much on what we're going to need 5 years from now, for example. And then finally, I think you need to be open and understand that when we look at that list of tools, people said 5 to 10 tools. Not every ATS is going to do everything, and honestly, it shouldn't, because trends come and go, new things get hot, and then some succeed and some fail. So you need to reserve or leave open that possibility that when you pick a tool, that some things are going to need to be third party, right? No problem, right? Just as long as the ATS you have can be integrated with, or we'll be able to add it in the future, et cetera. But be open to that. I think, of course, as you go through this process, you gotta check the boxes. But honestly, there's so many boxes, and sometimes I think teams get overwhelmed with the boxes, and they maybe lose sight of the main goal, right? So sure, this product checks 25 out of the 30 boxes, or actually, maybe a better example. This one checks 200 out of the 250 boxes we had, and so their score is 98% on the fit matrix, right? The problem is that the people who, if you get too down in the weeds on the check boxes, you probably lose sight of the main things you're trying to evaluate the platform on. Is this actually going to move the needle for your organization? And so in that vein, I think I would recommend stack ranking them. And that literally means that you have to make choices where every single one has a priority over the other, right? So consider stack ranking your check boxes, and then weighting the score, because it's just very easy to lose sight of the main goal when it comes to evaluating software. And so I think what this boils down to is that by understanding um, how vendors are targeting the market and what kind of products they're building for their target, and understanding where you fit on each, right? Where whether or not vendors are targeting you and your needs, and what's most important to you when you're evaluating your product, you can find the right product that fits you. And so that's what fits all about. And to me, it's no different than trying to find a great candidate, right? It's not just about what's on the resume. It's about the person. It's about the opportunity. It's about their free will to fill that position, and do their best, right? And so, finding the right fit is what you all do best. And this fit should be for the long run, right? Look for shared goals and their ability to grow, and their desire to grow with you. And I think when you look beyond the checkboxes, you're going to realize that there's no perfect fit. But what you're trying to do is find the vendor product combo that has the most overlap with your needs, right? And so I think that's there you go. So a few gotchas that we've experienced, and this is from past lives and in the current products, right? So one, I think you should be careful for products that aren't currently being, aren't actively being updated. Now, speaking for our own experience, right? It's easy to ship a feature a month, when you're small. Obviously, as you get bigger, it's a whole lot harder to ship quality that fast. But if your vendor hasn't shipped anything in 2 years and their blog hasn't been updated in 5, that might be an interesting sign. Next, I think you should definitely check out review scores. There's no shortage of review sites out there that are taking reviews. And my advice here is to kind of be like a Yelp ninja, where just by reading the reviews, both positive and negative, you can actually decide, especially the negative ones, you can actually decide if that's like important to you, right? Like, maybe the negative review is, the tool doesn't integrate with Taleo. It's 0 stars. I hate this product. And you're like, well, I don't care about Taleo, and that doesn't even fit my market. And so, perfect, this product's fine for me, right? So sometimes you can use a negative review as an indicator for what's actually aligns with you. So look at reviews. I would be careful, and you'll see this during a demo, whether or not the tool has too many bells and whistles, and ends up sort of being bloated. If it's got every feature for everybody, it kind of isn't, for anybody. So just be on the lookout for that. Some people call this consultingware. Some people call it crapware. Invariably over time, in fact, I think one of the hardest things we face as a development team is saying no to stuff, or yes with an if and no with a but. So yes, we're going to do that. If we can do it this way, but no, we're not going to do that. But you can get around it this way, because if we just say yes to everything, 5 years from now, we're going to have a whole big pile of garbage that no one's going to want to use. Next, obviously, watch out for things that appear to be too good to be true. It's the magic recruit button. It's going to find all your passive candidates for a nickel. It's amazing. Sure. I think there's other things too where we get around LinkedIn's data scraping thing. Whatever it is, there's always random claims that people are going to make, or prices that are too big. It's free. It's free forever. Well, nothing's ever free. That means they're selling your data. Vendors have to make money, and so understanding how they make money will decide, et cetera. And to that end, if a product is so cheap, you have to understand, well, how are they going to fund future development? How are they going to provide good support, right? So just look out for things that are too good to be true. Next, and I think this is really important for people who are full-time professional recruiters, if you're going to be living in your ATS all day long, make sure it's a tool that you're going to want to look at and live in, right? It should integrate with your work stream. It should integrate with your email provider, your tools, your Outlook, your browser, and it should be, something you actually want to work with all day long. I've heard time and time again from customers where they're like, I didn't realize how much I hated, looking at my old system until I started using a newer system. And then finally, look for them if they're slow and unresponsive during the sales process, and if they're not consultative during the sales process, because if that's how they sell to you, that's how they're going to support you, and that's how they're going to handle you in the future. So I'm going to segue here, and actually I might pause to see if Tim has any smart questions that have come up, and then we'll cut over to the benefits of a recruiting CRM.
I think most of the questions have been answered. If you guys didn't know, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can simply type in any questions that you guys want, answered. Aaron may be able to answer some here on the webinar to the entire audience, and I'm also answering them in the chat. So feel free to ask some questions.
Okay, cool. So a recruiting CRM, and it's interesting. In our last poll, only 8% of you said finding recs was number one, but a lot of you did say engaging your clients and candidates. And so let's talk about a CRM for a second here. So prior to Correlate, the last product. Well, two products prior, I was the lead application developer for a product called Microsoft Dynamics CRM. Right, it was CRM 1.0. Yada, yada, yada. I've been doing CRM for a really long time. And CRM is all about managing the flow of opportunities, right? And just like you have a candidate workflow, you have an opportunity workflow. And so what is a recruiting CRM? Well, so recruiting CRM is the concept of managing both your sales and opportunity workflow as well as your sourcing recruiting workflow in the same system, right? It allows to have your account execs, your sales execs, and your sourcers and your recruiters all in the same system, harmoniously working together, et cetera. That's the theory. And step number one is to have them in the same system. I think the problem is a little more nuanced, though, than just adding a drop down to your rec that says status, right? The sales process is not unlike the recruiting process, right? You have to fill your funnel. You got to work them through the stages. There's activities and energy that goes into moving them from stage to stage. You got to get the paper. You got to close the deal. You got to identify the hiring manager, et cetera. And this is true whether you're an agency or a corporate recruiter, right? Like, you've got a whole, litany of recs coming in, and they have a process that they got to go through. Someone's got to write the JD. Someone's got to get budget approval. Someone's got to do this. Whatever your process is, having the CRM side of it will allow you to help your customer, whether or not it's the internal customer or an external customer. And so just like you're going to move your candidates through your workflow, right? You have a process where you need to engage with candidates, right? All the same things you want to do with your customers. You want to email them. You want to text them. You want to give them access via a portal so they can check on things. You want to do the same thing with your customer, whether they're internal or not, and you want to do your own workflow for them. And so the functional overlap between the two is very similar. But the need to customize each independently, I think, is also very, very high. And so that's a promise of a recruiting CRM. And so I will actually take our next poll, which is what, if any, does your current recruiting team use for a CRM today? How are you engaging candidates, clients and customers, both internal and external? I'm going to bring up the next poll. And boom, there we go. So one, you're using your current recruiting system, and it's awesome. And there are some recruiting systems out there that do this. So that's great. Next, you're kind of using your current recruiting system, but you wish you were better. You've hacked in some custom field, or you got a little drop down. You've got a full, third-party CRM system, and but it's not integrated. And having them not be integrated is quite common. I've worked at very large staffing and consulting firms, and they had enough resources to basically have an army of people that sat in the middle. Those systems never talk to each other. Or do you have a third-party system and it is integrated? Or is the answer nothing? Cool, we're at about 50% here. Let's see if we can get a few more votes in. Oh, just a few more percentages points. We'll give people a few more things. So what CRM system are you using today? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close this, and I will share the results. Aha. And that's interesting. If you want to type in the chat, maybe for those that answered, you wish it were better. Would love to hear how you wish it was better. So please do share. Um, I think the interesting thing here is that I think this concept of a recruiting CRM, even though the processes are very similar, I think some products have kind of just sort of tried to bolt it on, or it was kind of an afterthought, and they didn't fully appreciate the complexities involved. That might be why you wish it was better, but I would love to hear for those that want to share via the chat how they wanted it better. That's great. Okay, we should be back to the presentation. Okay, so let's wrap up some of that stuff and talk about. So these are some questions you want to ask about your current ATS and decide if it's actually helping you, right? So number one, am I working for my ATS, or is my ATS working for me? If you find yourself having to do more hoops just to get it in so you can track it, that's not really helping. If your system has a workflow process and then you got to think in the abstract here, is actually just generating work for you. And let me give you an example. When I move a candidate from stage 1 to stage 2, the system generates 12 activities that then get assigned out to my team members, and the team members have to log back into the system and check out the activities and say that they did them. Like, yes, it's important to know that the activities are getting done, but when you really think about it, like, the tool is just basically creating checklists for you. And I'm sure half the time you're like, check all done, move to the next step. Is your ATS flexible and customizable? Again, it's funny the stories that you hear about broken recruiting processes where, because their big system had some rigid process, people go offline, right? They got the whiteboard where, okay, between step 6 and 7 is where we go to the whiteboard and manage the whole real process because the tool was locked down a certain way, either by management or by the tool. So consider that and assess your overall process. Is your workflow around opportunity and sales more sophisticated than just a dropdown, right? So if you wish it was doing better, why? And if you can identify the why you wish your CRM was better, then you can go find tools that address it. And ultimately, is your ATS saving you time so you can go build more relationships? I mean, plain and simple. And I think I would add to that: is your recruiting process designed to do the same thing, right? Are you spending more times doing internal meetings? Are you spending more times on stuff your boss made you do? Zoom out and think about what's the priority for your recruiting strategy and apply it. And then that ultimately comes down to the question: is my system meeting my current needs? But you have to know what your current needs are before you can answer that question. Okay. So how much is all this going to cost? And when we talk about cost, actually, I'll pause there. Tim, anything to jump in on?
Yeah, we actually do have a great question out there and a pretty hot topic. How important is a possible integration with LinkedIn, especially since LinkedIn is changing the possibilities of scraping data from their site? And I know this is a really hot topic right now. I figured I'd let you go ahead and give that an answer.
It's a great question. And I think the answer is I don't think anyone really knows for sure what LinkedIn is going to do with their policies. I think the interesting challenge is that, and I won't speak to LinkedIn directly, but any vendor whose primary asset is people, right? Let's say is data, is naturally protective of that data. Recruiters, on the other hand, have a natural desire to own the data as well, right? I'm going to be engaging this person and working this person. I don't want to always pay for the rights to do that, and so I think there's a natural tension between those two sides. I can't speak to the to the exact example there, but what's interesting is that if you look at the vendors that do integrate with LinkedIn, I believe that they all require you to have LinkedIn recruiter licenses, which makes sense. And so I think the answer is I don't know exactly where that's headed. I think we're continuously looking to work with LinkedIn. Love to be a partner with them, and I know others would too. But that program has been open in the past. It's been closed. It's been open again. It's closed. It just kind of depends on what LinkedIn decides to do going forward. Happy to take that offline for any individuals who want to follow up a little later. Switching over into cost for a second. So great. You're going to deploy a new recruiting solution. Let's talk about all the costs you got to consider. So first off, a little bit of education. How are ATSs priced? And there's a lot of options here, just like there's a lot of vendors. So one is the sort of the one-time fee of a license, and this is commonly being phased out now. But this is when you're going to install your ATS on a box somewhere or buy a license. But that's sort of the one-time fee thing, and you quote unquote own it. But obviously the most popular is subscription. You're going to pay some sort of ongoing fee for continued access. So that's cool. The next is consumption, right? You're going to pay for what you use, how many jobs you're going to post or whatever. And then next is, and finally, there's a freemium, right? It's free, and then you just pay to unlock features as you go. And some vendors provide combinations of these. Some offer different flavors. You can buy it one way or the other. But these are the different ways that things are going to be priced. Next, how are they going to arrive at the actual price you're going to pay? And these are the common ways that we've seen. One is per recruiter, right? You're going to pay per seat who's logged in. And this is more common for products that are targeting professional recruiters, right, who are going to be in the system all day. Tools that are targeting more casual recruiters or corporate, less on the agency side, typically price on a per employee basis or perhaps on company revenue, right? It's some sort of a factor around that. I think Google Hire is being priced based on number of employees, right? If you have up to 50 employees, it's one price. Up to 200 employees, it's another price. Up to 1,000 employees, it's another price. Finally, there's the for better or for worse, the dreaded per post fee. And this is where it's like, well, how many jobs are you going to have open at a time, right? 2, 3, 500? They'll negotiate a price based on that. And then finally, there's sort of the anything goes bucket. It's the dreaded call us pricing. And the answer there is that it depends. It depends on your negotiating skills. It depends on their negotiating skills. It depends on all kinds of stuff. So those are kind of the ways these things are priced. And so when you want to figure out your overall cost benefit and your cost, you got to definitely know the cost. And so here are the buckets to consider when you're pricing out a new system. So one is going to be the one-time fees. These are the initial fees that you have to pay to get on board and up and running. And these are some buckets to consider. So first is going to be your data migration, if you have one, right? But how much is it going to cost to get the data from the old system to the new system? Now I have it goes 0 to 100K here. I mean, and I say that because I've done data migrations for Fortune 100 companies that cost millions of dollars, right? I mean, the point is an actual data migration can actually cost a lot of money when it's got billions of records, et cetera. Most recruiters aren't dealing with that, but you can there's definitely real value in a migration. Some developer and some consultant have to sit down and understand your data, understand the new data, work with you to do that, and write code to make it happen. That takes time, and time costs money. Now, some vendors might choose to absorb that cost and offer it at a discount, but don't be fooled. There's definitely real value being delivered with the data migration. And so you need to understand that. Typically, for vendors that are not giving that away as part of some sort of offering, I've heard data migrations come in the sort of 500, 2,000, 5K range. Next is onboarding and training. Again, this can range from go ahead and download our video to we're going to fly out. And present to your team and be on site for a week, right? So prices can range from nothing to 30K. But understand all the costs it's going to take to onboard, train the trainer, train the individuals, etc. Next is the setup fee. And honestly, I feel like setup fees. Sometimes they're a holdover from the past. I mean, there was once upon a time where, there was setup, you had to go in and provision a database and install a CD disk or whatever. With more SaaS-based products, that's less likely. You usually just click a button. But sometimes there's still a setup fee, and sometimes a setup fee will cover some onboarding, et cetera. But look for a setup fee. And so the answer is your one-time cost is going to be somewhere between 0 and a lot. So be on the lookout for that. Next is going to be your recurring costs. Okay, so this is the actual license you're paying, and it kind of falls into 2 buckets. One, it's the monthly or annual fees for access. This could be, between $0 and $500 a month. kind of depending. And some are more, some are less, but it's going to be times n number of recruiters or n number of employees or n number of jobs, right? But that's going to be your recurring cost, right? Next, there'll be the add-on fees that go on top of that, in order to get more data storage or to get access to the whatever integration. There might be some fee that gets added on top of that. So make sure you know all the things that are going to be there. And then finally are going to be your consumption-based costs. And these are things you need to budget for. How many job postings you're going to be doing. Some providers, even for quote unquote free boards, they charge a fee, right? So, it's $20 to post to the free boards. Some don't. And then premium postings, we all know about premium postings, right? It's going to cost you $75 to get it out on ZipRecruiter, or you want to throw $300 at Indeed for clicks. Storage costs will also be, the more data you have in the system, that has real cost to vendors. Storage is cheap, but not that cheap, especially when you start talking about all the backups they got to do and all the data transfers they got to do, and depending on if the vendor is backing, your storage with fast SSDs, for example, that solid state disks that cost more than if they have older disks. And then finally, there's these the things that have actually real cost, right? So or more direct cost, right? So SMS, email, voice credits, right? If you're sending text messages from your ATS, rest assured that that vendor has to be paying some third-party provider, a penny or 2 pennies per text. So that has to come from somewhere. So you'll have the budget for those things. But when you total all those costs up, then you got to figure out, well, is the benefit of this going to be greater than the cost? And so I think this comes down to two things. One is going to be time savings. If you're paying your people 15 to 50 to $100 an hour, or depending on the level or how you have them going, how many hours can you save? Honestly, paying $80 a month for an ATS might not seem that bad in the scheme of things if it can save your sourcer, who you're paying $25 an hour, 15 hours a week, right, of data entry. It's a no-brainer. So look for understanding the actual time savings. One sort of rule of thumb here, which I'll take from the dev world, is whenever a dev says, I'm going to implement this new thing and it's going to be 400% faster, just cut your estimate in half. So if the team says it's going to save them 20 hours a week, well, then say, oh, well, it'll save us 10 hours a week. Great. And if that's still worth it, then you're in good shape. Next is it going to actually help with volume and actually make you more successful, right? Time savings can yield volume, but ultimately, is it empowering your team to go do the things they got to do, get on the phones, make the connections, to get more placements, and what is that worth to you? So just some examples. And I think when it comes to pricing, there's no right answer. It's just important to know that there's just different ways. And so you got to find the pricing model that fits for your business. When you're paying by the recruiter, pricing ranges from $0 to $300 a month per recruiter, kind of depending on how many features you want. Many vendors will discount this based on your level of commitment, and that makes sense, right? If you're willing to prepay, that has real value to a vendor, and they'll offer you a discount. If you're willing to commit for 3 years, they might offer you a discount. And sometimes in exchange for that commitment, they might be able to do things like give you a data migration, et cetera. But that's kind of the price range that you need to think about. And I think it's important to be reasonable here, right? Don't expect to give without or take without giving here. If you're pricing by employee, the price ranges from a nickel to $10 an employee. It just kind of depends on the system. And if you're pricing by job, I've seen this range anywhere from $5 to $50 on a per job basis. It just depends. So consider that. Okay, so some quick gotchas. One, the pricing that you see today may not be what works for you today may not work later, right? So great, it costs $300 a month for my one recruiter. Well, what happens when you have 10 recruiters, right? Consider that. So as you scale up, just make sure you think about how the pricing is going to fit you going forward. I would be mindful of wacky limits, right? It's free, but it only lets you have 100 candidates per month in your system, right? Can you actually be effective with some of these limits in place? So make sure you look out for the limits. Are the contract terms and the cancellation policy is going to be something that you can live with, right? So great, you're locked in for 3 years. If you need to cancel after a year, there's a $40 million breakup fee. I mean, I'm joking, but my point is that, look out for terms that are unreasonable. It all becomes due immediately. Do they charge you to get your data out? We'll talk about that in a second. And what are the total costs for support, and specifically good support? Some vendors I've seen, you get free unlimited support if you don't mind having your ticket answered in a week. If you want to get it answered in the next 24 hours, enter your credit card. And what is future pricing going to look like? Newer vendors might have lower pricing now, but it'll definitely rise next year, et cetera. And of course, redefine print. So let's talk about making a move. So if the benefits are going to increase the cost, what are some things to consider when working on your data migration? So the process for data migrations, and to be honest, data migrations don't have to be hard. But these are the steps that I think you should take when you do any good data migration, and this can be fast and slow. But the first step is discovery. And typically, when you do a data migration, you're going to request a copy of your data from your current vendor. And your new vendor will then take that data and look at it, work with you, help you fit a square peg into a round hole. And there will be plenty of that to do, because things that were popular 20 years ago weren't even possible, or things that are possible today weren't even available back then. So there needs to be some transformation of data. This is all during the discovery process. Your new vendor will then develop a migration and load it into a test environment for you. That's where you can look at it, make sure it fits, make sure nothing's missing, make sure you like how that data was transformed, make sure you like how that custom field got turned into a tag, et cetera. And then when you're ready to go, you're going to request another copy of your data, and then plan the cutover, right? So there's usually 2 exports from your old system that you got to go through, and so some vendors charge for that, so it's gonna be $200, per export or whatever, or you get 1 free per month, so just be aware of that when planning your pricing. And I think anytime we do, and I think anytime we do a new system, I think it's a great time to look at cleaning house and simplifying your process. Don't look to just take what the square peg and jam it into that round hole, right? I think it's important to spend some time to clean up your data. Do you really need to have an email you sent in the 80s in your new system? It's just going to cost you more. It's just going to slow you down. And I think when implementing a new system, there's 2 things that always, 2 rules of thumb. Start simple and get more complex. I think teams that come into a new system are like, well, we're going to create our new 25-step recruiting process. Maybe. Start simple and scale into complexity as it makes sense. The same is true with security. Don't think you're going to lock it all down and no one will have access and you can't collaborate. Start open and lock down as it makes sense, et cetera. So here are some gotchas for you. When assessing the data migration process, consider the cost and the timeline. So what is the timeline to start? Is it going to take 6 weeks to even get going? And once you get going, what is the timeline to complete? Is it typically a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a month? How much experience does the vendor have at migrating from the previous system? What is the total cost? And finally, how flexible is the process? Is it a one-size-fits-all migration? Like you don't get to say how the transform happens? Or is it consultative? I know we're running on time. Getting old data out might be harder than you think. So some vendors ship the data in bizarre cryptic formats, which I swear are designed to make it hard on the next guy. Or they'll be really slow with it. They'll send you a disk in the mail, which can make it really hard to minimize your downtime. Fully understand all the systems and things you got to do to update. Mobile phones, your website, your API, your back office. All of this needs to be understood when you're planning your cutover. And speaking of cutover, plan to minimize downtime. In an ideal world, you get you're able to schedule with your new vendor over a weekend, right? Everyone stops work on Friday. The migration happens over a weekend. They come into work on Monday, and they're up and ready to go. And I think the final point here is that you need to be flexible and reasonable. There's a real time cost in migrations, and the more reasonable you are about fitting that square peg into a round hole, and the more aligned both you and the vendor are on a happy endpoint, the happier everyone's going to be. If you're interested, we've got a actually pretty comprehensive guide to data migrations available on our website. We'll send this link out later on. So in closing, I think this all comes down to finding the right fit for you. You need a tool that's flexible enough to fit the work the way you do, that is able to change with the times as you change at times. And I think you need to invest in yourself and regularly reassess your tool set, all of it, email, ATS, Chrome extensions, etc. I think during this call, you've heard some of the benefits of a recruiting CRM. You've learned some strategies for picking a good ATS and a vendor. You've learned some things about considering the costs of a new ATS, and you've learned some common pitfalls. I sincerely hope that this has helped you be more informed to make better decisions for your business. And then my last slide. So two things. One, we would love your feedback. We've created a short survey. We have a dev team. We're constantly investing in the future. If you want to share some of your feedback of what you wish a dev team would go build for you to make your lives easier, you can click this link. It's correlate.com/showcase survey, and tell us where we should be investing to make the lives of recruiters easier, make you more effective, help you make a little bit more money. And finally, if you want a demo or a trial of Correlate or a free consultation, honestly, we're not interested in having you. If there's not a fit, we'd rather recommend someone else to you, and maybe later on will be a fit for you. We take great pride in our consultative approach to sales. No one wins if you come on board and then have to leave. So with that, I'll say thank you so much for your time, and open up to any questions that Tim might want to have.
We did have an interesting question when you were talking about migrations. This comes from a user who collects a lot of applicants in their process. They were asking if you had any thoughts on how to value past applicants to know the value of migrating applicants.
I think it's a fantastic question, and I think it really depends. But I think what we have found that people work smart with is to have some sort of cutoff date. And I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If your primary goal is to, let me give an example of what we do most often. Let's say you got 20 years of applicants in your system. We'll come up with some sort of cutoff date. Only import applicants that have been added to the system within 5 years. Because the resumes are friggin' ancient anyway for those ones from 15 years ago. But then we'll have an exception, unless I've spoken with them personally. Make sense? So that way you don't have the embarrassment of randomly talking to someone that you actually talked to 8 years ago, and like, well, don't you remember me? We talked back then, right? So, but it also allows you to clean up a lot of the garbage, right? So you still have fresh enough resumes at the end, and you have everyone that you actually engaged with prior to that. And so that seems to be kind of the best practice that we go with. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. So we have another one. What are your thoughts about ATS solutions that are too configurable, meaning it may offer great flexibility but also become over-configured?
I think that's an awesome question, and I think it depends on what you need. We've erred on making the system configurable, but as you configure it, we've erred on the side of trying to have it not be too rigid, right? So even though you can customize it to have the 20 steps you need, you can still skip steps throughout the process because recruiting is effectively fluid. I think the question really becomes how much. So number one, if it's very configurable, is it configurable enough that you can do it on your own, or do you need to hire them or someone to configure it for you? And whether or not you need to do that kind of depends on the complexity of your process and the nuance. But it's a very real risk. If it becomes so flexible, it doesn't. It's a balance. It's truly a balance. And so I think you gotta. I don't think there's a magic answer there. I think we argue about that every time we do a product review, a feature review. Should this be a feature? Should this be something we make one way for everybody? Anything else, Tim?
Kind of looking through the questions. Those are the big ones that just haven't been answered. I know there's a few people out there that are requesting demos of Crelate. We would absolutely love to show you a demo of Crelate, and we can send information over to everyone on how you can book that demo for the ones that I haven't answered inside of chat. We also have some questions that are great for a conversation offline. So those kinds of questions I'll go ahead and answer myself to you guys via email, or if you forwarded me your contact information, or I'll send them over to Aaron because we would be happy to answer those. So I think right now we are okay, Aaron.
Cool. Bill, are you on the line? I think we're ready to wrap up, and I thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you're all very busy and have got candidates to talk to.
That was
thank
really
you so much.
great. That was a really great presentation, Aaron. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and you covered a lot of ground. And hopefully, it helped people, have a better understanding of the world of ATS and what the capabilities are. And I'd urge everybody, if they're interested, to follow up with your questions with Aaron or with any of the other people on the Crelate staff.
Cool. Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. I'm going to end the webinar now, stop the recording, and please let me know if either you or anyone you know would like a copy of this recorded webinar. So thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you next time.